He was 5 when his father died. A pastor, a man of faith, a skull cracked by a brain disease. Friedrich watched him collapse and never rise again. They told him God had a plan. He nodded, but something inside him shattered quietly. Not with rage, not with tears, with silence. That's how it begins, not with rebellion, but with the slow erosion of belief. He learned early, the universe doesn't comfort the weak, it buries them. He was raised by women, mother, sisters, grandmothers, all pious, all proper. No space for doubt, no room for questions, only prayers, only obedience, only God. But even then, the boy felt it, the fracture in the divine order. He wasn't like the others. He didn't want to worship, he wanted to understand. He studied the Bible not to believe, but to confront. He memorized scripture, then ripped it apart in his mind, not out of hatred, but out of desperation to find something real. Because pain makes you honest, and loneliness turns your mind into a blade. By 14, he was writing music, poetry, essays, obsessed with meaning, death, suffering. While other boys chased praise, he chased the abyss. He didn't want comfort, he wanted truth. And truth doesn't comfort, it consumes. By 20, he had already outgrown theology. Not because he lacked faith, but because he saw what faith was hiding. He walked away from God, not as a rebel, but as a philosopher. Imagine the loneliness of being awake in a world that's still dreaming. That was Nietzsche, a genius trapped in a body too fragile and a world too blind. He felt the weight of humanity before he could even carry himself, and he made a promise, one the world would never forgive him for: to speak the truth, even if it killed him. And it would. They called him a prodigy. At 24, he became the youngest professor in the history of Basel University. No PhD, no formal defense, just brilliance, undeniable and uncontainable. But success? It doesn't crown the wise, it hunts them. He stepped into academia like a ghost in daylight. Polite, precise, but not one of them. He wasn't there to belong, he was there to dismantle. His lectures were quiet bombs. He didn't teach what people wanted to hear. He taught what made them uncomfortable, and they clapped. Out of fear, out of confusion, out of habit. Because people applaud what they don't understand, until it starts to hurt. He aligned himself with Wagner, the idol, the genius, the myth. They called it friendship. But deep down, Nietzsche knew. It was projection. He admired the art, not the man. Then came the betrayal. He saw through the pageantry. Behind the beauty was nationalism, anti-Semitism, romantic illusions. He walked away from the man, from the lie. And with that, the last illusion of belonging died. Then he turned to writing. The birth of tragedy. They hated it. Critics tore it apart. Colleagues turned their backs. But something darker had begun. Nietzsche had tasted isolation and made it his home. He kept writing. Human, all too human. Daybreak, The Gay Science. Each book sharper than the last. Each sentence a scalpel. He wasn't offering answers. He was carving open the soul of a culture built on fear. The truth? He was succeeding, but not in the way the world defines it. No lights, no fame, no money, just silence and blood on the page. The higher he climbed, the colder it got. And at the peak, he realized, there's no one else up here, just wind and ghosts. His words spread like poison, not because they were evil, but because they were true. And truth tastes bitter to those drunk on illusion. He wasn't celebrated. He was ignored, until madness became the only voice left that would listen. Pain, real pain, not metaphorical. Blinding migraines, vomiting, failing vision, nerves burning under his skin. Every day, his body betrayed him. Every day, he still wrote. Why? Because the mind can scream through the cracks, even when the world stops listening. Nietzsche began moving across Europe like a ghost with no country. Basel was gone. The university, the prestige, the platform, all left behind, like dust on a coat he no longer wore. He wandered from town to town, Genoa, Nice, Sils Maria, chasing dry climates and dark silences. Not to heal, but to survive long enough to finish what he started. No friends, no family. Just a typewriter, a cane, and the unbearable weight of knowing too much. He sent his books to colleagues. They didn't reply. He sent letters to publishers. They laughed, or worse, they pitied him. He had no audience, no echo, just the void. But here's the truth. This was his most creative period, his most dangerous, his most prophetic. Thus spoke Zarathustra didn't just come from brilliance. It came from isolation so complete, it scraped the edges of reality. He began writing like a prophet possessed. God is dead. He remains dead, and we have killed him. These weren't metaphors. They were autopsies. He was dissecting Western morality in real time, and the body was still twitching. He smiled less, slept worse, heard whispers when no one spoke. He started calling himself the crucified. He believed time was folding in on itself. That eternity had already happened. People whispered, "He's going mad." But what they didn't understand was this. He wasn't going mad. He was going somewhere no one had the courage to follow. Loneliness wasn't the symptom. It was the proof. Because when you walk too far from the herd, you stop sounding human. He had stared into the abyss for so long. It began to respond, but not with words, with silence. And in that silence, something broke. Not in him, in the world around him. Rome. January 3rd, 1889. A horse is being beaten in the street. A man, pale, broken, gaunt, rushes forward, wraps his arms around the animal, whispers something only the dead could understand, then collapses. He never speaks again. That man was Friedrich Nietzsche. Everything before that moment was a warning. Everything after was silence. They called it a breakdown. They called it madness. They called it what they always call it when truth becomes unbearable. But they never asked why he broke, because if they did, they might see themselves in the answer. For 11 years, Nietzsche lived in a body that looked human, but the mind was somewhere else. Institutionalized, drugged, forgotten. They propped him up for photos, mocked him in newspapers, patted themselves on the back for diagnosing him. Paralytic dementia, syphilis, hereditary madness. Words are easy when you need to silence a prophet. But this wasn't sickness. This was the consequence. He wrote like a man pulling fire from the gods, and fire doesn't come without burns. He had written it years before. He who fights with monsters must take care lest he become a monster. And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. That wasn't philosophy. That was autobiography. He was too awake, too aware, too clear. And clarity in a blind world looks like insanity. His sister took control of his legacy, twisted his words, marketed him to Nazis, used his silence as a canvas for lies. The man who warned of totalitarianism was turned into its mascot. He died in 1900, alone, unconscious, forgotten by the world he tried to save from itself. But here's the part that should terrify you. He was right. About God, about morality, about the price of truth. Nietzsche didn't collapse because he was wrong. He collapsed because he saw too much, because he walked too far. because he felt everything the rest of us spend our lives avoiding. You want the truth? Here it is. Friedrich Nietzsche didn't lose his mind. We did. He tried to show us that morality can rot, that belief can become a cage, that comfort can be the cruelest form of control. He screamed into the void, and the void handed him back a straitjacket. Because that's what we do to the ones who won't lie to us. We break them. We bury them. We name schools after them decades later, once we've cleaned the blood off their words. We celebrate Nietzsche now. We quote him, put his face on t-shirts, use his name in intellectual debates like a trophy. But we still live the lie he died trying to expose. We still chase meaning in things that are dying. Still build our identities on approval, on status, on noise. Still choose illusion, because truth is expensive. And Nietzsche paid in full. He wasn't a nihilist. He wasn't trying to destroy values. He was trying to rebuild them on something real, something earned, something human. But that kind of truth doesn't sell. It hurts. It isolates. It turns prophets into patients, thinkers into ghosts. You think success means money, fame, validation? Nietzsche had none of that. But he saw eternity. He named the demons in all of us. And for that, we left him alone in a room with no light. Because the most terrifying thing he ever said wasn't "God is dead." It was this: become who you are. Not what your parents told you, not what society rewards, not what earns applause. Who you are, naked, flawed, aware, awake. Can you? Or will you look away like the rest did? Because the price of truth isn't fame. It's isolation. It's pain. It's losing the world to finally see it. The abyss never left. It's waiting.